Good afternoon, folks. Chief Meteorologist Nick Lilia here with a look at your tropical update brought to you by the good folks at Pine Belt Gutters. This is for July 11th of 2019. Of course, we're watching now Tropical Storm Barry floating around out there in the Gulf of Mexico. Here's some bottom line facts for you to get you out the door. We are still anticipating a Category 1 hurricane according to the forecast at landfall. This is going to be somewhere along the Louisiana coast during the day on Saturday. Could be morning, could be midday. I don't think it'll drag off into the afternoon, but somewhere before noon, most likely. And then 4 to 10 inches of rain in our area. Tornadoes are going to be possible, but you got to keep in mind they're going to be tropical tornadoes. They're going to be pretty quick guys. They're going to be down and up and maybe even just a radar scan. So they may not be on the ground for more than 5 minutes. You may not get much of a warning with these, which is why during a tropical system we always recommend just stay inside. And then this is going to be, again, a Saturday-Sunday event for us. We're talking about 15 to 35 mile an hour wind. The track is going to end up being maybe a little closer to us than we were thinking about 24 hours ago. So wind gusts up to 50 miles an hour are going to be possible. Again, the tornado possibility is in there. A slight risk there. Again, green, yellow, it's lined up with the bar up here. We're most concerned about the flooding threat. 4 to 10 inches of rain across the area. Again, and this is the higher end of this isn't everybody. Not everyone gets 10 inches of rain. Some of you folks may only get 4. If you're real lucky, you won't even see 4 inches of rain by the time this is all said and done. That may lead to some flooding in some of the low-lying areas. The Weather Prediction Center is already tossing out a slight risk for flash flooding, a moderate risk for flash flooding on Saturday for Walthall and Pearl River counties in our area. This may need to get bumped up to a high before it's all said and done. And unfortunately, we're also going to be dealing with some power outages because of all of the rain, which is probably going to loosen some of the dirt up, and then you put a 15 to 25 to 35 mile an hour sustained wind on top of that over the course of 12 to 16 to 18 to 24 hours. And you're going to have trees coming down, and that's why we're going to end up likely with a couple of power outages. So here's Barry out here, and Barry's sucking in a whole mess of dry air right now. It's pretty lopsided. It's starting to get some convection trying to get wrapped around its center, but it ain't pretty right now. That's actually not the only game in town. Zoom it out here. And this little wave right here has a 10% chance of development as we head through the next 2 to 5 days from the National Hurricane Center. If it actually gets developed into something, it is going to die pretty quickly, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But first things first, I want to walk you guys through what's going on with Barry here. Currently 90 miles off to the south of the mouth of the Mississippi River, wind at 40 miles an hour, gusting to 50, moving west at 5 miles an hour. The cone, which takes it back off to the north and eventually off to the northeast, does clip some of our western counties. And the cone is not where the impacts are going to be. The cone is just for where is the center going to be. And as you see these lines across here, it is at an equal chance to be at any one point across this line. The middle isn't necessarily a higher chance that it's there than the outside. It's actually an equal chance all the way across the line at any one given particular time. So that's one thing that I think sometimes confuses people, because you don't look at this stuff all the time. There's no reason for you to remember that every single year. Oh yeah, that's right, that's how the cone works. That's why we're here, to remind you. And the impacts aren't just in the cone either. If this thing's 500 miles across, like it is right now, we can go back here, right now in the Gulf of Mexico, we'll get there. There it is. Look at how wide this thing is, about 500 miles across. All right, we'll go back to the wonderful cone here. There it is. So if we're going 250 miles out, 500 miles across, you cut it in half from the center of the storm, 250 miles out, you're talking about impacts that are going to be felt if it rides this eastern edge all the way out to like Destin and Panama City and maybe as far out as Columbus, Georgia. If it takes the far western track, you go 250 miles from that, that's still impacting us here in the Pine Belt. So even if it takes the far westerly kick and goes up, which we don't anticipate, but it takes the far westerly kick, we're still going to have impacts from this thing, and likely the impacts are going to be a whole mess of rain. Tropical storm watches and warnings are already in effect. They've actually stretched the tropical storm watch for the coastline of Mississippi. Remember yesterday, no tropical storm watches in effect. There are today. The hurricane watch is still in effect for parts of Louisiana. They have not issued any hurricane watches for the coastline of Mississippi yet, and I honestly don't think they will unless something changes drastically with Barry out there. However, they have introduced storm surge watches. At the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, they were calling for 1 to 3 feet of inundation near the mouth of the Pearl River. And that's 1 to 3 feet above ground level. So you're talking about, water up to about my waist, give or take. And that's just storm surge. That's just regular above ground water that's getting pushed ashore from the storm surge. On top of that, there could be flooding, there could be waves. So kind of keep that in mind. And that's all the way up the mouth of the Pearl River. In fact, there were, on the inundation map, a chance that some inundation made it almost all the way to Stennis Space Center, which is pretty incredible. Back around the region, what we're looking at is the probability of tropical storm force wind, a 25% chance in Hattiesburg, and that's just a point, but a 20 to 30% chance basically generally across the Pine Belt that you deal with tropical storm force wind. Again, that's wind around 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. Right now we're calling for 15 to 35, so it would be close to that category, that potential. But just a 25 to 30% chance is a better chance to head down into Louisiana. Hurricane force probabilities mainly just right along the Louisiana coast. And I really want to push that point. Even if this is a Category 1 hurricane as it comes ashore, the chances that our area deals with hurricane force wind, sustained wind, very low at this point. But that truly doesn't matter because with all the rain that we're about to get, 15 to 35 mile an hour wind with gusts to 40 and 50 are going to bring down plenty of trees anyway. In fact, how do the winds shake out? Well, let's set this thing in motion. Here we are Friday night at about 5 o'clock. We're talking about wind at 10 to 15 miles an hour. This is already calling for gusts at 35 to 40 in some places. European model, I think, being a little aggressive with our wind at that point. But as we head through Saturday morning, if you're up early enough, 10 to 15, gusts 35 to 40, I think that's when we finally start to see some pretty gusty wind across the area with some of these feeder bands as they get wrapped around. By the afternoon, you can actually see back in behind me where the European has all the strongest wind, where the closer to the center of the storm is going to be. But we're still talking about 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 15 to 20, down along the coast 20 to 25 with gusts 35 to 40, 35 to 40, maybe 50 to 55 miles an hour, a little bit closer to the Mississippi coast. As we head through Sunday morning as you wake up, still sustained winds, it says at 10 to 15 or 15 to 20 with those gusts at 25 to 30, 35 to 40 miles an hour still in the area. And as we head through Sunday afternoon, now we're talking about winds 15 to 20 back out of the south as the center moves to the north, with those wind gusts still pretty breezy across the area. 35 to 40, 35 to 40. We've got somewhere around 50 miles an hour. So again, this is going to be a prolonged wind event. That's the problem. It's not that the wind speed is going to be very high. It's that we're going to be dealing with a sustained wind for a very long time. This started Friday night, and here we are Saturday afternoon still dealing with the same wind. On top of getting 2 to 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 to maybe a foot of rain. That's going to be the problem that we're dealing with. And how much rain are we talking about? Well, that same model, that European model that we were just looking at, keeps a lot of the rain just off to our west. That's a lot of rain for the folks in Jackson and for Baton Rouge, with a stripe in here where it turns black and pink. You can see that's 15 to 20 plus inches of rain down along parts of the Mississippi River, the last place that they need it. That's just one model, though. We can look at a different model. Okay, what's the American model say? Well, it happens to have a lot more rain in here. And again, we're talking about white to pink to black. You're talking about going from 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 to 20 inches of rain, 20 plus inches of rain. And that instead would be across parts of Pearl River County and some of our counties, with a 15 inches, it says, in Hattiesburg. This is why we've got that 4 to 10 inch range across our area. I know that sounds like a pretty wide stretch, but unfortunately, given the model data, with one saying 15 to 25 to 30 inches of rain, and the other one saying about 2 to 6 inches of rain, I think 4 to 10 is a reasonable compromise between the two, because I actually tend to think and this is the #1 question I get, well, which model's right? Neither of them are right. It's going to be somewhere kind of in the middle and not any one model in particular. All right, so now let's look a little further out and into the open Atlantic, our 700 millibar Moisture 850 Vorticity Mac. Now that we've covered Barry, I do want to highlight this little wave down here. That's that one with 10% chance of development. Watch what happens with all this dry air out here. It just kind of gets swallowed up. There's another one back in behind it, but it too kind of falls apart and gets swallowed up. And then there's one back in behind that as we head through kind of the middle of July that tries to stay alive, but it's got all that dry air in there as well. So thank goodness, Barry being the only thing we got to worry about right now, even though there's something back in behind it, it doesn't look like, as of right now at least, that it's going to survive very long given all the dry air that's out there. So there's a look at your tropical update. Again, July 11th of 2019, brought to you by good folks at Pine Belt Gutters. Hopefully that answers all of your questions about Barry, but again, you can always find us on social media. If you have any follow-ups, we'll be happy to let you know.